can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Jason Sharpe of AXS. You can check him out at AXS3D.com, AXS 3D. And Jason, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out. I kind of say, Jason, doing research, if science and Pixar had a baby, it'd be AXS Studio. And one of the past guests, I had the co-founder of Pixar on. And so that's an interesting episode. Alvy Ray Smith talks about, he has some great George Lucas stories, some Steve Jobs stories, and kind of just the pathway of Pixar. Super interesting story. Check that out. Also, since this is part of the Top Agency series, I had Jason Swank on the podcast. Jason Swank built his agency up to 8 figures, sold it, and then had been buying up agencies as an agency group. And that was just interesting, the landscape, valuations in the agency world. Also, Kevin Hurrigan of Spinutech started his agency back in 1995. And just the evolution of his business career and the agency life and the internet. That was also a very interesting episode, so check that out. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships. And how do we do that? We actually do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. Jason, we call ourselves the magic elves that are running around in the background to make it look easy for the host so they can create great content, develop amazing relationships, and run their business. So for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way than to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce Jason Sharpe. He's a co-founder of AXS 3D, AXS3D.com. And they're the perfect combination, as I was saying, between art and science in biomedical communication space. They use 3D animation, so think Pixar, and interactive design to explain how diseases and treatments actually work inside the body. And AXS has worked with some of the biggest pharma companies on the planet, and they work with small startups as well. They help explain their products and technologies to customers and investors. Past clients that you can see on their website include Pfizer, Abbott, Bayer Healthcare, Boston Scientific, and many, many more. Jason, thanks for joining me.
Jeremy, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Thanks for that introduction.
I'm going to pull up my screen. So if you're listening to the audio only, there is a video component to this. And this, out of most interviews, really lends itself to video. So I'm going to share Jason, the website and some of their work as he's talking, but just tell us about AXS and what you do.
Well, I think you gave a really good overview. I like the if Pixar and science had a baby, it would be AXS. The people at the company are all people who are very inspired by Pixar and animation in general. We're people who were artists. We were the ones who drew in class, often got in trouble for drawing when we were in class. We're also very interested in the sciences, and so we studied science in school and then found a way to merge those two disciplines with this work in the field of biomedical communications. So we actually use software to do this work that is very similar to what Pixar uses and Disney uses. So I'll often use that explanation to explain to people what we do. And this is something in our field, medical illustrators is a running joke that we cannot explain to people what it is we do. So we do use 3D animation and graphics production software to create animations, illustrations, and interactive applications. And we do this primarily for the purpose of explaining science to people and telling science stories. And by telling science stories, what I mean is for a client who has a particular disease story or drug that they're working on, explaining to their audience, which is often physicians, how that disease process works in the body and how the drug works to intervene. And that usually involves visualizing things at a cellular and molecular level. And so we'll do that for professional audiences, but we also do work for patient audiences. And in that case, we're taking complex science and we're telling it or explaining it in a way that can be understood by somebody without a science background. And what's common to all of the work we do, regardless of the audience, is that we're using visuals to do this. We're using animation, we're using images, because we know that people learn and understand things visually because we're visual creatures. So we can tell a lot in a 2-minute animation. We can explain a lot and leave an impression that would be very difficult to do in 2 minutes of reading, for example. So
Not only difficult, but not understandable. Like
often
even
not
if you read
understandable.
it, there's no
Yeah.
way like to visualize it really, at least for me, really solidifies the understanding of it.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And if you're looking at it, we can kind of see some of the work as we're looking at this. Jason, what are some of the use cases, right? So I can
Yeah.
see use cases like a drug, they want to a drug, they're coming out with a drug commercial and they need to explain very quickly and easily what something's doing, like what a drug is doing or interactions. What are the use cases that you've seen that are common?
Yeah. So I'd say the most common use case that we're involved in is explaining to specialists new information about disease pathways. So in which one of our client is developing a new drug or several new drugs. So it might be a particular pathway in cancer. When I say a pathway, I'm talking about how molecules interact in a cell, making things go bad. When their research turns up new information on that, they want to educate the medical community about it, so that they are primed for when they have a therapy that is ready to address it. They understand the science, they understand the rationale for that therapeutic mechanism. Another
Let's take
use case.
this. Is this
Yeah.
an example of that? We're looking at, I'm not sure if that is, but
This was an interesting example because that's tumor growth, and this was for this was a video actually that was used in an FDA submission for a drug that was being reviewed, and so it was used to explain this to the panel of reviewers, which had not only professionals, had scientists on the audience, but it also had representatives of the public. So it was used to explain how that what molecules were involved in the progression of that disease, and then how the therapeutic molecule intervened to stop that cancer. Another one you scrolled by earlier, there were a bunch of chromosomes there. So that's
this one here.
a startup. Yeah, well, that's a drug that blocks the formation of microtubules, or the skeleton that forms the structure of our cells, and that's actually one way of killing cancer cells. So, but other examples would be for companies with, like, say, a new diagnostic company that is looking to raise awareness and quite often raise investment capital. And they need to explain what it is actually their technology does. And so it's sometimes these technologies are quite difficult to explain to a lay audience. And often the investors that are investing in biotech, they've got a base level knowledge of science, but being able to show them exactly what the approach is, how it works, and why it works, can make the difference between, a yes and a no in
Yeah.
a
A
1 or
light
2 minute
bulb has to go
presentation.
on, and I mean, significant dollars are on the line here in many
Totally,
respects.
totally.
Um, whether it's a consumer or investor, I mean, pharmaceutical company, I mean, huge dollars just to get it passed through all the stages, let alone out to the public. So, yeah, investing in a video that actually explains it succinctly is probably one of the best investments they can make, I imagine.
Hmm.
Um, I want to talk about niche for a second, okay?
Hmm.
Because with you and your team's skill sets, you can do, I don't know, I'm going to say almost anything, but you chose to go this medical route, right? Because I could see lots of applications for what you do in TV, in movies, in technology. How did the medical niche start? And this is like, for
Yeah,
any agency, they're thinking, what niche do I
yeah.
choose? Do I even choose a niche? How'd medical
You're
find you?
yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, these skills, these talents are applicable to different industries for sure. And before I got into this, I was working in kind of general consumer advertising, doing art direction before I was trained as a medical animator. So certainly they can. I think what drew us to medicine is just a real a deep interest in the subject matter and the science. It's that, and the people who get drawn into this field are um, people who like lifelong learning and are kind of science provides that opportunity. There is never a moment when when there isn't something new that we're learning, and the landscape in medical science and medical research changes. It's changing daily, and so it's fascinating. And being able to be part of explaining that to people um, allows us to learn and stay up or keep up with what's happening. So I think it's just it's interest level, and we're all I speak for myself. I'll speak for my company a little bit. I'd say we're all kind of science nerds,
When
and
you
we enjoy
originally
it.
started the company, were you thinking, yes, we're doing the medical space? Or
Yes,
you were right off the bat?
yeah. So and the reason we a lot of people get into this field coming out of other areas. And so I actually had a job in advertising, and I quit my job and I went back to school and I did a master's at the University of Toronto. So did my two business partners. One of them, Sonia, she was a research scientist at U of T. She was working in a lab. And Eddie, he was in visual effects, 3D animation, working with a Shanghai TV station, and subsequently worked with animation companies. And so they had done other things and they'd stumbled upon this as I had and went, wow, this is amazing. So we happened to go to the same program in Toronto. There are four other programs in North America, five in total, that including Toronto, that are accredited, that teach biomedical communications, or some call it medical illustration. Uh, and uh, and so you come out of this with specialized training in science communication and digital art production, whether that's illustration, animation, or interactive production. So yeah, we came into it very intentionally, working in the medical field, and we chose to focus on pharma and biotech medical devices because the work that interests us is 3D animation, and that is expensive, time-consuming work. And those are the companies with the products and the budgets that call for that kind of work. So,
What's a major milestone so you start the company. I'd love
mhm.
to hear the evolution of the staff and the hiring. So it sounds like three of you start the company. What was the first major milestone from a client perspective? Because some of these, and if you can't name names, that's fine, but
Mhm.
some of these, it's not easy to get into a pharmaceutical company, right? I mean, they probably have a lot of procedures and protocols. It's a big organization. What was a major milestone from like a client standpoint
Yeah.
in your evolution?
You're right. It is very hard to get into pharma companies, particularly the bigger, the harder. I'd say that, well, we were lucky in that a big milestone came early in through a referral. And that was we were referred to a TV production that was being shot in Toronto called Regenesis. It was a biotech drama that had a good run. It ran internationally. It ran 4 seasons. They brought us in season 2 after having some difficulty with the visual effects in the first season because they didn't have science expertise. They had a world-renowned scientist advising the show, but they didn't have a digital team that could visualize what he was talking about. We showed them our work. This
They're
was
like, we need
only
an interpreter. We don't know what this guy's
yeah,
talking about.
and this was like a year or two. I don't remember exactly into our company, and so we jumped in and we wound up doing 3 seasons, and it was producing for TV. It was a pretty quick turnaround. Every week we were producing a lot of material, and it was really cool. It was stuff that was ripped from the headlines, the plots. It was all biotech, bioterrorism, and we would visualize. The scientists would start talking, and we'd zoom in, or they'd have a call out, and we'd show exactly what they were talking about, whether it was a DNA or a virus or some kind of parasite. And that was really fun because we got to do a really lot of interesting visualizations. And then Dr. Aled Edwards, he's the world-renowned scientist I mentioned, he was the scientific advisor. And so every piece that we worked on, from storyboard to rough cut to final, he reviewed and advised. So we knew we were getting really kind of top-notch advice, and that was very gratifying. And that gave us a kickstart because we had a fantastic portfolio, and we gained a lot of valuable experience. And from that, we've done a number of documentaries. We worked on a movie with Adrian Brody and Sarah Pauly called Splice, where we were doing the same kind of thing, visualizing what the scientists were talking about. That was a Vincenzo Natali movie. Yeah, so that was the kickstart. I'd say after that, our kind of first big pharma gig, which really turned into a long-standing relationship with a lot of work, again, came through an introduction. As you know, I know you're always touting relationships and the importance of them. That's how it happens. Like I can't go and knock on the door of Pfizer and say, hi, can I show you my portfolio? And we'd love to work for you. It's all through introductions, and that's why it's so important to network and keep in touch with people.
We'll talk about the staffing piece, because when you have these big projects, I'm wondering how you handle the staffing up and down. But on that topic of partnerships and collaborations, I totally agree with you. Some of the best relationships come from just collaborations. You mentioned the scientific advisor. What other collaborations? Because I know there's other projects. I can't remember if it was a psoriatic one that you have really collaborated with other companies on.
Yeah, there was so there are a couple examples on our website of interactive projects. So we do the animations, but we've got a really good interactive development team in-house and design team. And so we're an integrated team. We've got animators, designers, and developers, so programmers. And so a lot of our projects, like this one here, are interactive experiences. So by interactive, I mean you're not just watching a video, you're actually engaging, and things are happening on the screen, and you're like a game. You're controlling the flow of the experience. This one was really interesting. It was we called it the psoriatic arthritis simulator. So this was an early example of I was going to call it AR. This wasn't augmented reality. It was using a motion detection device that we don't want to say like cannibalize, but we actually used it to detect a person's hand motion, and we built this box. So you put your hand inside the box, and it picks up your hand, and then you see on a screen a replica of your hand, but it's your skeleton. And every movement you make, your skeleton follows. And they were able to show the progression of psoriatic arthritis, disease progression over time. And what was really interesting is we controlled the model. So you're watching it, but we controlled it. So as the disease progressed, we actually, on the 3D model, we restricted the movements, and people said they actually felt like they had trouble moving their hands.
Wow.
And they watched the progression of the disease over time unfolding on their hand. And that gave them a very kind of immediate experience of what it was
powerful.
like. And you can see in the picture, we had people lining up to try it. And so that was something where our designers who are doing the user experience, the user interface, our 3D animators who are building the models and rigging and animating them, and then our developers who are programming everything together to work with the technology. In this case, we were using the Leap Motion device to make the experience come together. The other part of this, you asked about collaborations, is so we don't actually build these structures. The booth you're looking at, this was built by a company in Massachusetts called AXS TCA, and they're a fantastic exhibit company that we've collaborated with quite a while. They do a lot of work in the healthcare medical world. And so they design and build these exhibits. They work in other industries as well. We only know them through our work in healthcare and for big scientific meetings. But so we'll send them drawings, concept drawings. They'll do the engineering drawings for the actual structures. If you go down to that other example I mentioned, the oncology arcade experience. So we did this retro arcade to explain how a particular drug technology, an immuno-oncology technology works, and to get the point across and make it enjoyable. These are oncologists. That is a difficult career to be an oncologist.
Oh my God.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
And so we do a lot of work in oncology. We do a lot of exhibits and videos for oncology meetings. And so
this must have been the biggest hit of this meeting, a video game, actually. You know
it was huge. It was huge. So we actually, in 3 days, this was at the American Society for Clinical Oncology meeting. I mentioned you're in Chicago.
I'm really curious about this really quickly. It's like, I wonder if there's some kind of science experience, as you know, my background's in biochemistry as a chiropractor, when we visualize things, there's a direct connection. There's a Candace Pert book, Molecules of Emotion, and what we think obviously happens in our body from a physiological standpoint. I'm really wondering if you have patients play this video game of eating up cancer cells or something, if that would actually increase their immune system or help with the treatment itself. Anyways, keep going. It's just really interesting because visualizing something, eating, something could create a physiological effect in the body.
It would be interesting to look into for sure. And I that was our motivation behind this. We had to teach a specific drug mechanism. This is cancer cells, when cancer goes bad, it's often because it becomes evasive. Your immune system is constantly killing cancer cells. We're not to be alarmist, but cancer cells develop in our body almost on a daily basis, and our immune system keeps it in check. They detect them, they gobble them up.
That thought freaks me out every single day. But yes, I'm too well aware of that. Yeah.
Good reason to keep your immune system healthy. And when cancer learns to evade just through mutations, can evade detection by immune cells, they can no longer pick them up. So a number of technologies, such as this BiTE immunotherapy, allow T cells, the body's immune cells that attack and kill cancer cells, to re-engage. They actually they facilitate the binding to cancer cells that goes away when cancer cells become evasive. And so we just had to teach that basic principle, but we also wanted to give them something fun, something enjoyable to do in their 5-day, 12-hour-a-day meeting before they go back to their 12-hour-a-day job. So we made this arcade, and people had a lot of fun. We had a leaderboard. We had people coming back trying to beat their scores, and we had a full-time facilitator, Justin, who I think is in one of the pictures, who was incredible. These are some other people we collaborate with, as well as the facilitators that work these meetings, who basically bring people in and get them to try these. But it was a huge success. We had in 3 days over 800 people use this, and so it really brought people into our client's booth and got a lot of conversations started, which is kind of the point, as well as engaging them. But back to the collaboration. So this was the company I mentioned, AXS TCA. So we came up with this concept of a retro arcade. We did concept renderings in our 3D program, and our designers came up with the graphics. So we came up with renderings, and then working with the person we work most often with is Joe Mazzarelli at AXS TCA. With his team, they would do the engineering drawings, they'd build it, and then we would, go back and forth, make sure everything's working. At the same time, the company that handles all the AV, which is a huge part of this, right? The electronics, making sure the TV, the speakers work. We're coordinating with them to make sure our joystick electronics and everything are going to work with their equipment. And that's D&J Electronics in New Jersey, Dave and Roel and their team. And so then we get on site ahead of this big meeting. You probably aware of when ASCO hit Chicago. There are about 60,000 people that attend this meeting. It's not as big as the auto or the restaurant meetings, but it's pretty big. And then we get there a couple days before, and we work with D&J Electronics and with AXS TCA, getting all this stuff set up and running so that when the doctors walk in on opening day, everything's up and working. So it is a very collaborative approach or process. And when we pitch an idea like this to our client, before we even go to them with the concept drawings, I will call up Joe, I'll call up Roel, and I'll say, can we talk about this? Can we actually pull this off in the time and the budget that we need to? So
it's a lot of moving pieces here. This is incredible. I'm gonna have to come to the conference just to see if I can get on the leaderboard. But staffing. So you get a big project. I was talking to someone a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and one of their first couple clients, it ended up being like a 7-figure project. And they said it was the best and worst thing that happened to them because they had to staff up. And then when that project went away, they weren't super experienced at the time, and they hadn't figured out kind of staffing up and staffing down. And so they had all these people kind of sitting around after the project was done. So talk about your hiring process, and it's really specific to an industry, right? So it's not like you could just come and take, hey, we'll train you for like a week and you're ready to go here. What does your hiring process look like?
So we've grown organically right from the start. So we're just returning 20 this year. We're at 21 people. We've gone, we've been up as many as 24, but typically lately we've been hovering around 18 to 20 people. So we hire only when we need to. And we hire to fill specific positions, and we have not taken on projects that require a massive staff up. And I think that's kind of a function of the type of work that we do. We're very careful about our planning with our capacity. And I'd say the biggest challenge for us is finding the right talent.
Yeah. So it's more like a client selection, but like you're careful on the projects you take on, so it doesn't, because fast growth can hurt a company as well.
Totally. And we have worked with freelancers at times. So we had a bit of an upswing in 2023. We brought in some freelancers to work with us, and they work closely with our team. They're all people that we know who are in the industry. So we're able to scale up and down. We're fairly flexible that way. What we've never done, and we've always tried not to do, and this is part, I think part of the reason we've got a good culture, is we never laid anybody off, even through COVID. And so that's been really important to us. So we're not in it for, we're not in it to grow for growth's sake. We grow with purpose, with intention. So
what are the things you do? You mentioned culture that allows you and the team and the company to maintain a good culture.
Well, it used to be that we were all in a fantastic studio in downtown Toronto with lots of windows, which is unusual for an animation studio, but we had breakfast together every Friday for a long time. Somebody different would do it, or people would team up and do it. We have team building events a couple times a year, and we are regularly in meetings, and we Slack a lot. So we're slacking each other in teams all day. We've got different production teams happening, and we meet. We have 3 meetings a week, staff meetings, one that's all staff. And so that's a big part of it, just kind of touching base with everybody. And then Sonia, who's our head of HR, my co-founder of AXS, she does regular check-ins with her staff or with our account staff, and then all of our department heads. Same thing is we do weekly check-ins. So, and that's just really important with in the work from home environment. We still have a downtown office space. I'm working from home today, but we don't. People have become very comfortable and used to working from home, so that's been, it's an ongoing challenge.
I'm
Yeah.
curious, also, Jason, there's a lot of moving pieces here
Mhm.
with what you do. And I think for any company or you specifically agency, there's a major quality control that you maintain, right? Because we're talking like big pharma. There's a lot of stipulations.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that you do, measures you put in place from like a quality control perspective that other companies could learn from?
Yeah, you're right. That's probably more of a thing in our business than it would be in kind of traditional marketing or advertising. We have a very thorough review process that we've developed over the years that has checks and balances where everything is logged. Every change is logged, whether it's changed to when you talk about dialogue in our animations or any written text that's on a screen, that is scrutinized by medical, legal, and regulatory teams before anything is released. So any changes we get have to be very carefully logged and checked off. We just have a really good internal process that we've developed, and we stick by it.
Yeah.
That, and I think the fact that I think the training is a big part of it in terms of the medical accuracy. So everybody on our staff has a base level of scientific and medical training to do this work. So they're coming at it with a base level of knowledge. But it's a checks and balances and a QA system that we have in place before anything goes out.
I'm curious, from a tech stack perspective, are there certain softwares you're using to monitor those things or log them? I know people use various project management tools or things like that. What do you use to actually, I know I'm getting a little technical here, but I'm
Mhm.
always curious people's tech stack of to actually log it.
Yeah. Uh, we're using it's a real combination of different things. Actually, we don't have one platform that does everything for us. We use one platform for scheduling and task management, and we have another for change logs and QA. And then we have a different CRM system. And so one of the challenges for us as a small business, and we've been looking at this for years, is finding a solution that works. And some of our competitors, and I call them competitors, they're friendly competitors in our business, but that are a little bigger than us have built custom systems. So they basically brought in developers to build stuff. So I'm always on the lookout for something because we would love an integrated system. So I don't know if any of your other guests or if you're aware of anything you've heard of, we would love a solution for that. There are great project management applications out there for animation production because that's quite an established industry. And there's great stuff out there for the advertising industry. There's nothing that we've seen that brings them together along with a CRM that does accounting and stuff like that. So that's kind of the holy grail for us in terms of
Yeah,
business management.
it's tough, because
Mhm.
I mean, you kind of, at least the way I view it, I kind of want something that specializes because they're really good at it. So something that does everything I've found does some of the stuff not that great.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. What do you
Yeah.
like to use? Do you use like an industry specific, like project management, task management tool,
So
or
yeah,
is it?
for project management, task management, we use something called 5 p.m. And it's not really industry specific. It's kind of a niche software application
Mhm.
that we came across years ago, and we honestly haven't found anything better. Um, and they're actually very responsive in terms of support. They're not that big. It's just called 5 p.m. No
Yeah.
spaces. And it's actually been quite good for scheduling and task logging. We have to combine it with other things. We use Google Drive, like the Google Suite, and trying to think of what else. We use Salesforce for CRM and
Yeah, we used
planning.
Asana for many years, and then we switched to ClickUp. So
Okay.
it's interesting. I'll have to check out 5 p.m. and just poke around there for a second. We do like ClickUp, but it's always good to explore other tools. I wanted to talk about a really cool project that you did, and it actually got a lot of exposure on the internet. And there was a chicken embryo development. I'll share the screen here, but can you talk about this project for a second?
Yeah, so that was a really fun one and maybe a little unusual for the type of work we do. But the Poultry CRC is a group in Australia that advocates for the poultry industry, and this was done for education and awareness in Australian schools. I think it's got to be more than 10 years old now, and it was the first end-to-end visualization of how chicken embryo evolves from an ovum to a full-fledged chick. And I think it was a really neat project to work on. It was fun from an animation perspective. Like technically, it was challenging to do this kind of morphing of models through different stages. And it was a good example in terms of motion graphics, like the visual design of the labels on the screen, and also incorporation of music. And this was we had a custom music track composed by Zach Kellum, who's a musician, Toronto-based musician that we collaborate with quite a bit. Fantastic artist, and it's if you listen to it, if your listeners have a chance to check it out, it's got kind of a nursery feel to it. So it's got this kind of delicate, childlike score that goes along with the growth of the chick. And this, I say it was surprising because it's had over 35 million views on YouTube, which far exceeds anything else we've done. And it's, I think, because it's much more mainstream and accessible than a lot of the work that we do. And it's been copied a lot. I've seen it. People have done edits from it and recreated it and stuff like that. So
really cool.
Yeah, but it's a neat project.
Really cool stuff.
Who doesn't like babies, right? Or baby animals.
Exactly. Baby chicks. I just want to, Jason, thank you. Thanks for sharing your journey, your knowledge, your stories, really fascinating work that you do for these companies. And I just want to encourage everyone, check out what they have there. Some of the, you can go to AXS3D.com, AXS3D.com to learn more and check out more episodes of the podcast. And Jason, thanks again. Thanks, everyone.
Jeremy, thanks for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.